Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hey, Bethany, can we talk about real quick with our listeners? I know we constantly are getting asked, where can we hear y'all next? Where can we hear y'all next? And can we tell them about our road trip?
Yes,
what's coming up next in
let's do
April?
it.
Okay, so if y'all are ready for the Big Country Dental Roundup event in Abilene, Texas. Where's Abilene? I had to ask you. Where's that at? How are we getting there? Where's Abilene at, Bethany?
It's good old West Texas. So it's about 2 hours from the DFW Metroplex. It is a legitimate town with great hotels, good food.
Good schools.
Yeah, and good
right?
schools.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what is the Big Country Dental Roundup event? It's hosted by, I believe, Dental Compliance and MCS, two great companies. We're clients of both. And they invited us to speak at their lineup. And I cannot believe this. I was like, did I read this right? Like, what is going on? And my guess is maybe because it's Abilene, like it might be harder to get to. I don't know. But it's free. It's a free event.
Can you believe that they were able to do that? I'm so glad. I know that was their goal, to be able to make it free, but it's all day. There's, I think, up to 5 CE credits, if I remember correctly. So it's a great event. I think they're even feeding some really great barbecue at lunch. I'm like, it can't get any better than free CE, great speakers, West Texas, and barbecue.
Yeah. So I'm excited. So that, we didn't even talk about when it is. It is in April.
Yes.
April 14th, which I think is a Friday.
It's a Friday.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
8:30 to 4 or 8 to 4, I believe. So it's a 1-day event, and we've got breakfast to start and then a lineup of really great speakers. It ties in with our episode today. It's really focusing on practice transition, associateships, compliance, just lots of great topics, all in one place. And
so as you were talking, I was looking it up. And so if anybody wants to check it out, dentalcompliance.com/Abilene. dentalcompliance.com/Abilene. And I'm sure you weren't trying to toot our own horn, like great speakers are speaking at No, but I'm excited to be speaking. I think our topic is very relevant. That's what they asked us to speak about. And again, I can't believe it's free. I'm excited to go. And for anybody who's been asking where you're going to see us next, that's where we will be.
April 14th. Check us out there. We'd love to meet you guys. I'm excited to talk about something with you. We've talked about it a lot before, actually, but we haven't spoken about this in a while. But I bring it up today because I've had several clients, 2 in particular that I'm thinking of, that have asked me within the last few months, what do you think about me selling my practice? And it made me think of some of the conversations that we've had and where all that conversation has gone. And so I want to kind of let this conversation take us where it may. I think it will go in a lot of different directions. But the first question I wanted to ask you is, why do you think this is coming up more and more?
Well, it's funny you ask this, or that we're talking about this, because even just this past week alone, like if you would have said this to me 3 months ago, I would have been like, oh, hell no, we've talked about this. I know this is not the right move for me. But even within the last weekish or so, now that you're saying that 2 of your clients have been bringing it up, then I'm going, wait a minute, is something in the air here?
Yeah.
And even though we have talked about it, I want to say we've podcasted about it at some point, but it's funny, like I'm sure you're thinking like, okay, come on, stay with me now. But because even some of the things that I know that you've said to me that we've talked about, it's like it comes full circle. And it's like, I thought we digested this, we broke it down, and we, dissected it. But things change. I guess that's all I can say with that, is that even though we've talked about it before, there's new circumstances or new ways of looking at things in perspective. So what was the question you asked me? Why is this coming up?
Yeah, why do you think, what are some of the reasons why you feel like maybe now's a time that people are thinking about selling again? And by the way, when I mentioned these 2 clients, both, late 30s, maybe early 40s at the latest. So definitely not what we would envision as somebody who's thinking about selling. And I know really when you and I started talking about it years ago, and on and off throughout the years, I mean, you're in that same age bracket where it's like, wow, it breaks the traditional model of I practice dentistry solo, and then once I get close to retirement age, I start thinking about selling at that point. And I just feel like practice owners are starting to think about it earlier and earlier. And I think it begs the question, why? Why do we think they're thinking about it earlier?
Well, now it's funny too that you say it's this younger bracket, because when I'm thinking about it, the last time you and I seriously talked about it, and I was like ready to like sign something. If somebody brought a contract my way, I would have signed it. And that was around that time when I was that age. And now a couple of years have gone by and I got out of that, but now I'm kind of going back again. So I guess I can't speak for everybody. I will say in my own case, what I'm thinking about, I was even joking with my sisters about this. Are we having a midlife crisis? Because neither one of them are dentists, practice owners, but just they're frustrated in their own jobs. And, I'm like, is this what's happening now? You're mid 40s and kind of going, what the hell? Like, we've got to work for another, I don't know, 25, 30 years. For me in particular, it's what else would I do with myself? I think that's where I keep coming back to. And I keep thinking, if I retired, say at the typical retirement age of 55, 60, 65, whatever that is, but people are living longer, and assuming I'm one of those, then what am I going to do and support myself and sustain, my own independence, that I'm not relying on my children to help take care of me, or, Social Security. And that's a whole nother, not for this podcast talk, but so anyway, so why am I thinking about it right now? I think for me right now, and I'd love to see what your clients are thinking, I'm just so tired. I'm so damn tired. And so what am I tired of? I'm tired of the employee staffing issues. Like, I mean, it was a problem before the pandemic, certainly, crazy town after. It just hasn't gotten better. I don't see an end in sight. I just don't. And so I'm just really jaded and frustrated with all of that. I think patients are, let me say verbiage that I can say on a podcast. I think patients have become even more just demanding.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be nice here and not, you have to like bleep out my expletives here, but I'm just frustrated. I'm frustrated at all of that. I'm frustrated at regulation. Just thinking that state boards aren't going to have your side, or your academy's going to have your side should anything happen. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know, but just something to worry about. I'm beyond frustrated at compensation from insurance. So I'm just trying to think like, what part of this is going to get better? And I just don't see that it's like, I'm going to have to evolve and change my expectations and change, where I've been. And I mean, obviously that's life, but I'm just tired. Like, it's all hitting at the same time. Do I get joy out of going into my practice? Yeah, sometimes when I see the patients. And I guess that's the other thing I had to think about, like really think about was, is it the dentistry? Are you tired of the dentistry? Are you tired of the patients? And really, if I think about it, no, I still enjoy, like I could be a total grump getting to the office, but the minute I walk into that operatory, I'm like, am I just performing? Is this just doing what I know, do my shtick? No, like I truly am wanting to help that patient. I'm intrigued by how their clinical presentation is. I'm intrigued by this treatment plan versus that treatment. So the dentistry is still exciting to me. It's just all the rest. And it's becoming, when you like imagine a balance beam, like a weigh scale, not a balance beam, a weighing scale. It's like, does it are they balancing about like, all these things are annoying, but the dentistry sure is, balancing it out. But I feel like it's quite an imbalance. Like the dentistry is trying to overcome, but the other side of the scale, I'm just so stinking bogged down by.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, how do I get out of this? Like, what are the solutions? What are the plans? What are the options? And honestly, when it's like all of those things, it's like it was just a staffing thing. Fine, fix the staffing. Oh, but wait, then there's still the insurance. Oh, but wait, there's still and it's just like, there's too much to have to fix here.
Yeah.
You know what? Let me get out.
Yeah.
Because that way, maybe if I did sell, maybe I could still do the dentistry without all the other nonsense. And I don't know if I'm fooling myself.
Right.
So.
Right.
I'll quit talking. I don't know if that's what your other clients are facing or not, but I would say that's how
I think it is. I mean, just hearing you talk about it and reflecting back on a couple of the conversations that I've had recently, I absolutely feel like it's just this overwhelming feeling of stress, anxiety, that there's this feeling of it's not going to get better. Can I continue this? I think that's what it boils down to. The thought process of, can I continue this for the next 20 years? Am I going to be content in trying to continue this for the next 20 years?
Well, even 20 years to me, I'm like, even the next 2.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can keep doing this and keep juggling this and and then back to, again, is it just me in this phase of life? Is grass greener? Blah, blah, blah. But I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. I feel like I've been so tired. Like I was tired before the pandemic, super tired during. That's when we lost a lot of the staff that kind of, like, I know for me, we lost a couple of our really good staff, not at the time of the pandemic, but like a year and a half to 2 years after, because they were so tired of pushing through and fighting through. But I'm like, but I want to throw in the white flag now too. I think I'm just tired.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot in the past, and honestly why you're still probably sitting here today having not sold your practice, is I feel like there's these emotional ebbs and flows that every practice owner goes through. And it is normally, I would say probably 99% of the time, it's normally in those really high stress times or high negative times. We had back-to-back, negative reviews, and then I've got this employee complaining, and then I got this one that just left. It's in those moments of crunch that we start to go, I don't know if I can make it. And you and I have talked about this a lot. It's in those times that absolutely we should think about life. We should reevaluate our practice ownership. We should reevaluate our goals and all of that. It's a good time to reevaluate, but is it a good time to make a major decision in that moment? No. So I am always of the mindset of, I would never want to encourage a client one way or another where they're in this really negative moment, because they're not seeing clearly in that moment. It's much better to make a major practice decision like selling when you're in a good place, because you can see better from that vantage point. I think it's human nature when we're kind of drowning in stress or things are getting piled on our plate, we start thinking, oh my gosh, I got to start offloading stuff. And practice ownership being one of the most stressful components on the plate seems like the most likely choice to kind of move off the plate. Well, I could easily still practice dentistry and move that practice ownership and all the headaches that come along with it off my plate, and then I'll be fine. And that very well could be the case. It absolutely could. But in that place of the plate being overwhelming is probably not the best time to decide on that.
And I agree with that. I think the problem is that I feel right now is, like you're saying, it ebbs and flows, but I feel like it's ebbing and flowing a lot faster. And those negative moments are far more
frequent
than they've, it's like before. I feel like when I first started practice ownership over a decade ago, it's like, yeah, you'd have maybe 3 times in the year that you're like, what the hell am I doing? And you were fine. And now it's like the overwhelming feeling of those negative, it's like it's switched. Yeah. There's probably 3 times in the year that I'm going, oh, everything's fine. And the whole rest of the time it's like, God, I hate this. Do I have any more fuel left to keep going? And then that goes back to, maybe I just need to see a counselor and offload my frustrations. Is it the age that I'm in and the season of life and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, it's all of these things. But I think, that's probably what's driving and going, which is the best way to offload something off my plate. I think this last week, and talking more with you too, I think there's so much that we don't know. Like, for example, for me, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or whatever. Like, I know there's a lot I don't know, but still I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a dozen years. Like, I'm probably pretty well equipped to know. And the more I talk and ask, I'm realizing how very little I am equipped to know. Like, for example, you shared some stuff with me that your dad, and I don't know that you're willing to share it on the podcast, or maybe he needs to be here to share it himself. But just things that he's now realizing, you know, years later in his own situation, that I'm like, oh, that wouldn't have occurred to me. Right. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. So I think like you're saying, yes. And it makes sense. Like, yes, there's always a balance in life. Like, there's always a give and take. And to get rid of the practice and practice dentistry, it's common sense. It's intuitive to know that that's going to come with. But I think we all try to assume that we know what that piece is going to come with. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to have this and this, but I'm going to have this. But there's just so many things that we don't even know that could be on our plate. And how would we know that?
There's no way to truly project that. I mean, there's obviously countless amount of research and all of that you can do. So a lot of times in these moments of, should I sell the practice, I tend to go, okay, let's make sure that we've evaluated all other options first. And we may circle the bandwagon and come right back to, selling makes sense. Or we may, as we talk through all of the ways to reduce stress, make life better, get your plate a little bit more evenly balanced, we may realize that there are solutions we haven't thought of before. And it just took that moment of, I think I'm going to sell the practice, to go, oh gosh, that's huge. Let me backtrack and make sure that there's nothing else I can do. So I would say most people get into that zone, and then as they start to think through changes that they can make, it alleviates some of the stress. Now, what it doesn't alleviate is that burden of, I am a practice owner, and all the joys are going to be mine out of this practice, and all the burdens are going to be mine. It is both. And I equate it similar to raising children. There's a whole ton of joys in that process, and there's a whole ton of heartaches. Is it worthwhile? Absolutely. Are you creating little creatures that will hopefully, do good in this world? Absolutely. The practice is very equatable to that. You put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. And are there a lot of joys that come out of it? Yeah. Are there a ton of heartaches? Absolutely. And so it's just balancing, at what point do I go, okay, I've raised this little practice into something that I feel good stepping away from. And then the question becomes, to what? To what am I stepping into from this point? And there is a risk to that. It is unknown. So I think a lot of people who walk through this process of, should I sell, it's, do I tweak what I have because I know it and I know it well enough that I can continue to manage it, or do I kind of step into this unknown? And you're right, there's risk involved with that. But at some point, that risk makes sense depending upon life. So in your time of kind of questioning practice selling, obviously the headaches and the stress and all of that have been part of what's led to it. Over these past few years, I feel like we've gotten to this point several times and we've tweaked some things. Oh, let's do this and that will alleviate some of the stress. Let's do this and that will help with some of the stress. So can you talk us through maybe some of the things that have tweaked and changed over the years to where you're still owning your practice, when 5 years ago that was looking like it may not happen?
I think, that's a good question. I think honestly, I don't even remember. You'd be the one who'd have to tell me what we changed, because you're the strategizer. I just think I know what I'm saying, and you're really the one like guiding it in the background. But for me, the only thing I can come up with right now is that taking that moment to think about what life would look like if I didn't have the practice, and would that truly be less stressful? And the answer has always been a resounding, oh no. Like, okay, like totally grass is absolutely not greener over there. It's bright yellow, right? And I've got the lush over here. So I think just really thinking about all of that. So, for example, you said to me 5-ish years ago, you said, okay, why don't you go spend a day or two associating in another practice? Because you've got an associate here, then that way you can remember what it feels like to not be the owner. And I think I've shared this before, but I couldn't even get on the phone to ask a buddy, just the bile rising, going, I can't imagine stepping into somebody else's practice and following all their rules. And then I think about, right now, planning for the summer, and now we're trying to plan a couple little short road trips. I don't think I could do that as easily if I work for somebody else. I think, I've been needed to help with family members more over the last couple of months. I wouldn't be able to do that as easily. Looking at my colleagues that kind of come help me sometimes and going, man, the schedule was full. This happened just Friday. The schedule looked like it was going to be super crazy full. And so I pulled in my buddy to come help me. Well, then the day before I was like, well, this day's going to fall apart. Yeah. So I just think all of that, in my mind, I'm like, but if that was me on the receiving end of that call, counting on that income, counting on, so there's just a lot of things that I think for me, I stopped and I went, whoa, it makes it sound so easy and nice that, somebody else is going to come in and manage the payroll. Somebody else is going to come in and manage the staffing. But I start going, but are you? Are you going to be there on the ground? Well, of course not. So then who's still going to have to clean up this mess with this upset patient? And who's still, it's still my license. It's still, me who's going to end up at the state board, not this company.
Right.
So I just think I think that for me, it's always when I'm ready to go, God, I'm done. But then I stop and I go, okay, but what is that going to mean if if I can't stand my own staff right now, am I going to go work in somebody else's practice where I love their staff? Yeah. Of course not. Right. So at least these are the people I chose, like them or not. Or the other thought that comes to mind, sell and get out of dentistry, go do something else, but do what?
Right.
So I've tried the teaching thing, it sounds good. And it was fine for a little bit, but when you think about the day in, the day out, all of that, then I start going, oh. So It might be fine for people. I'm just saying, I guess my point is stop and think about, really think about, take the rose glasses off and start going, okay, what will my actual day be like? And I think that has stopped me in my tracks every time.
Yeah. And to me, that's one of the best things that you can do, because we do have a tendency, it's human nature to be like, oh, life will be so much better if only this. And when we're talking about a practice, selling a practice, I tend to think about it from a very longitudinal type, it's one singular line in my mind. And so when I step into a practice and I see all this work that's gone into the point that I'm inserting myself into that timeline with a practice, there's so much that's been invested in that practice, emotionally, financially. There's marketing that's happened. There's hiring that's happened. There's training that's happened, right? And there's this point that I'm stepping into a practice. And then I tend to go, we can learn from what we look back at, but then let's allow that to kind of propel us forward on this timeline and where are we going? And so when, as a practice owner, you think about selling your practice, there are times that it will make sense. And I definitely feel like there are times that it's like, okay, this life has led you to a certain point where this makes a lot of sense. But I would say in most cases, I look at that practice timeline and I go, it doesn't make sense to me at this point. First of all, because there's been all of these investments that have been made mentally, emotionally, financially. You are invested in this practice. And what you're doing is potentially interrupting that investment, cutting off. Yes, there's this sell of the practice, but you're essentially cutting off an investment, even if you remain in the practice, right? So let's say you remain as the practicing dentist, but a corporate or a partner or something like that owns it fully, and your ownership aspect is gone. I always talk about that's similar to leasing a home, right? So if you live in a home for several years that you're leasing, it's not that you're not doing anything to it. Yeah, you do the flower beds every year. You paint the walls. Oh gosh, I don't like this light fixture. I'm going to probably change that light fixture. So as you live in a home, you're still acting like you're the owner of that home in a lot of ways. Not always. You're not going to go replace the AC units, but you're going to be very involved in that home. But every investment you make goes to somebody else. You are not earning the potential of that. Also, if you sell at a certain point, that is a lot of people plan on that for retirement. So like when you are talking with your financial planner, the sale of the practice is a part of the income that they're thinking about for retirement. So let's say we back that timeline up and we go, okay, I'm 42 and I'm going to sell my practice now. My advice is do not depend on that income. That income was always considered as a part of your retirement package. So it's not like, oh, life's going to be so much better because I've got $1 million from this practice that I just sold. No. That $1 million goes into your retirement fund like you've always planned for it to go. And then you start that day. So the timeline's broken. You start that day still practicing in your practice, not as the owner, but now your salary or your production incentive or whatever, that is now your income. And are you going to be okay with that? Do you know what it takes to continue at your same level of income without using that $1 million from your practice as a supplemental income? Because if you do that, you're going to have to work that much longer to be able to fulfill your retirement plans that you had in mind. So I view the practice, and I always have, as your best investment. To me, it's better than owning a home. It's that good of an investment, and you put so much time and energy into it, but ultimately, does it pay off? Yes. Day in and day out, it pays off, and it's sometimes hard to remember that in moments of high stress. You're thinking, God, is this even worth it? And again, I go back to, it's like replacing the AC units at your house. Are you going to get a return on that? You've put all this emotional energy into this practice. Are you going to get a return? Absolutely. You will continue to get a return as you continue to invest in your practice. And then there will come a point where selling the practice does make sense. And maybe that is at 42, depending upon your life goals. Maybe you have always wanted to be in real estate, and on the side, you've been working weekends to develop this really great real estate career. And now you need to be able to focus on that and practice dentistry 3 days a week and do real estate. Okay, yeah, great. That makes a lot of sense that you can back away from the day in and day out operations of the practice and focus on your real estate dreams. But most of the time, the best investment is keeping that practice and maintaining it through the lifetime of it.
So some of the things that maybe occurred to everybody else and not me, but one of the things, like right now when I think about it, I'm like, I'm making this, but I could probably make that as an associate in somebody else's practice without all of this headache, right?
That's a common thought, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I think as an owner, what I don't think about is all the and I still don't know all the ins and outs of it, but all the tax benefits and the things that you can blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think about all of that. So if I were to sell and transition straight to being an associate for somebody, then I'm actually potentially making less. It's almost like when I say to the employees that are making $10 an hour, but they're not factoring in their 401k, their PTO, their all of that. And it's like, well, actually, when you look at everything, you're actually making, $13 an hour. Well, no, I'm not. But then they move to another practice where they're not getting all of that.
Yeah.
And they're back to that 10 and they're like, whoa, I just took a pay cut. And so anyway, I kind of think about it that same way without getting into all the details. But I think there are certain things that we're allowed to write off or to certain things that anyway. So I guess my point is factoring that into the true, what is your living expenses and going, wait, if I thought I was only making this much, but are you truly, being able to take advantage the same way?
And the other component to that is, because you're absolutely right, there are so many financial implications as a practice owner or as a business owner that you have this ability from a tax standpoint to play around with things to make it make a lot of sense. The other component to that is, as a practice owner, anytime the business does better, provided that you're managing expenses and all that, as the business does better, you personally can tap into the excess, so to speak. So, wow, I can really ramp it up. I can open up my schedule. I can, do more treatment. I can do whatever because I've got this goal of saving for this really great trip at the end of the year. So I'm really going to try to make these next 6 months really count. Well, every penny more that the practice produces, collects, and doesn't spend is yours in essence. Now, where you choose to put that in savings or retirement or towards a trip is completely to your discretion. It is, I wouldn't say impossible. It is very difficult to do that in an associateship position, even if you're paid on a production or collection standpoint, because there's only so much sway you have in that, right? So let's say you're like, hey, practice owner, I work for you and I really want to try to make more money. So I got to I'm paid on production. So I really want to get my production up. That practice owner can very much say, oh, I completely understand, but we do have a limited number of staff. I've got to retain these staff. I can't really run a super robust schedule like you're wanting to run over these next few months because I've got staff that I've got to keep and they will quit on me if we do that. So we're going to keep running the same schedule. What can you do? There's no other way to do it except pick up other days somewhere else, work Saturdays to kind of earn the extra income. And that's that practice owner's right to say that. They're not bound to you making a certain amount or staffing it in a certain way that you can make more money. So financially, you're very constricted in an associateship position because it's not your decision.
See, and I almost thought it was opposite. Like if you went to corporate, like if you sold, to corporate because they're going to want you to produce a lot more.
Right.
And make you work a lot more, not less.
Right.
But so I was envisioning the opposite problem. Like they're going to try to run me to the ground.
Right. No. So it is not. Now you could definitely go and work for a corporate corporate practice or something like that and get some ability. Like they're happy to run you as hard as you want to run. So you do have in more of a corporate entity, you might have a little bit more ability to kind of up your income. I would say a lot of associates are in non-corporate situations. So they do work they get kind of in their minds, they get the best of both worlds, private practice, working for a doctor that owns one or two practices. So they are not what I would call corporate.
But I'm talking about like if I said I'm going to sell my practice to, DSO B, and now I can, they're going to want me to produce a lot more.
Oh, yes. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yes. And then it really becomes, okay, I'm going to run this as fast and hard as I want. And it becomes the burden of the corporate ownership to ultimately make that possible. The problem is they're going to have just as many hiring issues as every other person has. So as far as like, let me get in there and let me ramp up this schedule. Now that the corporate owns it, I can totally just ramp it up. Well, yeah, once they find you the staff. So it's the same. They're going to have the same problems. Their problems aren't any different than a private practice owner. The only difference is sometimes, although it's not in your situation, it's not any different, but sometimes that corporate has the health insurance that some people are looking for, retirement, all of that. You have all that already. So as far as attracting this whole new population of employees that want to work, well, no, you actually offer all that a corporate would offer. So it's not that they're going to be able to,
So that's one thing I constantly have to remind myself going, because that's what I hear. Oh, they're going to handle the staffing and I'm like, well, I could hire anybody, but I'm very particular about who I want because that's going to affect the quality of the work I do. And in my practice, like the customer service is paramount. Like our patients are so difficult with a lot of that. And so you get the wrong person looking at you the wrong way, or, my patients have a tizzy about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can bring in somebody. Well, I got to brought in somebody.
Yeah.
But there's a reason I didn't hire all these people, or a reason I let these people go. Because I didn't want just a warm body in there. And so I think that's another like really strong sticking point for me going, you make it sound like it's going to be, but I probably don't want the people you're going to bring in. And so the quality of my day is really going to suck. And I'm going to be unbelievably, like I was already stressed about the assistant who couldn't get the notes right or who couldn't communicate the treatment plan right to the parent. And those are the people I picked. So like, what's going to happen when it's like the people you pick to come in? And that's where all the stress is coming from anyway. So I don't see that be alleviated. Now, I will say on the other hand, I have thought like, yeah, could they do better? Like from a overhead standpoint, buying power, blah, blah, blah. That was trying to hit you with that. And then the other thing that occurred to me the other day was, well, if one of these parents is pissy at something and they try to sue me or something, like, would I hide under the coattails of the DSO and they could make it go away or not go away? But I don't know if that's true or not. Like, maybe they wouldn't make it go away. Maybe I'm on my own with liability. So I don't know. I don't know. So, yeah. So when I think about all of that, I'm like, whoa, maybe I won't sell. The other thing that makes me want to sell, though, sometimes is like, am I being dumb right now where you said, you've made all this investment into this business, but we've all seen the people that invest in a business and they run the business to the ground. And so if this is like, if it's a smarter decision, like taking all the emotion out, which is what's hard for me to do, like, is this a smarter decision? I was talking to somebody the other day, a salesman for one of these transition companies, and that's where he was like, different fields had their day, like medical, 10 years ago, pharmacy 10 years ago. Right now it's the time for dental and plastic surgery and whatever other stats he was throwing at me, that now's the time that our industry's consolidating, and an industry only consolidates once. And so if it's a time for dental now and I don't take advantage of this, joining, and then the private equity, and then the equity sells to blah, 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 and then I make all this money off of that, like just for a sheer numbers game, because that's kind of what got me a few years ago going, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss this gravy train. And
there's stupid. This window I've got to get in on.
Yeah. Just investing in my own practice that I'm running to the ground because I don't know what I'm doing anyway. Like maybe it's better that I, jump ship and so can you comment on any of that?
Yeah. So I would say there's always fear around missing a certain window of opportunity. What I have seen is that there is always, especially, a lot of this depends on location. So I will throw a big asterisk out there, but there is always a potential buyer. I have very rarely seen situations where it's like, yeah, I've got nobody looking. It's crickets. Because corporates have made this huge, there's several really strong DSO type situations, and so they're always there in the background, depending upon the practice. So it's got to be a certain type of practice for them, but they're always in the background. But because they're in the background, being so front and center with a lot of these transactions, the individual that is looking for a practice to purchase has found it so much harder to find a practice to purchase. So I can think of one client of mine that had the intention to buy a practice in the DFW area, really was wide open on her willingness to be in any particular area. She was willing to move, etc. It was incredibly hard for her to find a practice that was for sale, that hadn't been bought by a DSO or needed a buyer. It was stiff competition, to be perfectly honest, and ended up she did a startup on her own because she could not find a practice to buy.
But so case in point then, like that, and then that's what I'm kind of worried about then from a selling perspective. To two kind of thoughts on that. One, like, yeah, am I going to get to the point where I want to sell it to somebody and then nobody's buying it because they can't afford to, but then I don't want to sell it to the DSO, but maybe I do by that point. I don't know. The other thing then that comes to mind then is at least what they're telling you. And yes, I agree that I was hearing this from a salesperson. So I've got to take it with a grain of salt there. But, like if I sell and then I get equity, and then when that group sells, I get more money versus if I just sold it to an individual buyer, I'm only getting paid once. So I think those thoughts just linger in the back of your mind. And so I think that may be another thing where your other clients that are going, God, this is so damn hard. There are all of these things. I don't know what to offload. You know what? If nothing else, I'm going to make this beautiful piece of the pie at some point. So I've been through tough stuff before, like dental school, and I made it through that. If I can just get over the emotional standpoint and just dig my heels in and get through another 5 years, this is going to pay off. I think that's where, to me, I find myself thinking that actually quite often, but then I stop and I go, but I don't think I'd make it the 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, I just really don't think I would, because it would be, again, if I'm frustrated with my staff now, it's going to be the bottom of the barrel staff. If I'm frustrated with the patients, they're not going anywhere. They're the same people I got to service, and probably service even harder because now the DSO is telling me I've got to. So the only thing that I'm thinking that I might be missing on this is that chunk of change that may come with the private equity and when they sell and all that. And then I start going, well, but if I could still make more just working in my own practice.
That's what I always tell people is, first of all, I think you're making a couple of really good points that I think would be good takeaways for this, which is, number one, get multiple perspectives. I think it's absolutely great to talk to the salesperson that is wanting you to kind of consider buying your practice. Get their perspective. Talk to people who have sold their practice. Now, I'm going to put a big asterisk here. When you talk to people that have sold their practice to usually a DSO, it is very important for you to know that they are compensated for referring people to the DSO. So,
wow, did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
When they're talking rainbows and unicorns and it's bliss and you should totally do that, they are financially incentivized to tell you that. So you need to be very careful at just taking it at face value. But get that perspective. You absolutely must have a good CPA/financial planner on your team to talk about. Because you are making a point that I try to make to all people. Yes, think about it from the standpoint of selling and all the financial benefits that are to come with that. But also play out the scenario of, I continue to own this practice for the next 10 years. And I reap all the financial benefits of practice ownership. Does that compare? Most of the time you're going to come out ahead owning the practice. And we don't think about that. We think about, oh, wait, I've got this extra incentive, this equity, I can become a shareholder and all of this. But what I say is, let's just run the risk of own your practice for the next 10 years, continue to get all the benefits of being a practice owner, and then you sell, you still get some of the same benefits, you still get to be a shareholder. Yes, the dividends might be different, it might not be exactly the same as it was today, but chances are you will have gained all this extra from owning your practice, and you still get the benefit of when I sell all of these extra perks that come along with it. So please talk to your CPA financial advisor and get their perspective. And then I think do the soul searching that you've done multiple times of the year and keep coming back to this. It's not like you're going to make a decision and be like, boom, I'm done for the next 10 years. I've made my decision. You're going to keep questioning it. And that is okay, because in that process, we refine and we go, how can we make this something that's more enjoyable? How can we make this practice something that's less stressful? What are practical, tangible things that we can do? Because in that process, you may just find a solution that buys you another year or two. And then you may be back at the same point and you're reevaluating again. And that's okay. That's good. That means there's a refinement that needs to happen. Some of the refinement that I'll cut us off here and we'll talk about it in a next episode. Some of the refinement that we've done is really the incorporation of associates into your practice. And that played a very strong role in you continuing to own the practice. And so I do want to spend some more time in a separate episode talking about that.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone. But we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.